Congressman Scott Perry, who joins us here on WSBA. Good morning, Congressman. How are you?
Hey, I'm well, Gary. Good morning.
Well, lots to talk about this morning in our 20 minutes with you. And I guess the first thing we want to talk about the Cohen hearings last week. And, you know, I listened to Jerry Nadler yesterday on some of the Sunday talk shows, and he sounds like he's going to be interviewing 60 people. So no matter what comes out of the Mueller report, it looks like the Democrats are going to be investigating President Trump on whatever they can find. And what about the I word? Are they talking about impeachment? Your thoughts on all that?
Well, I think the hearing on Cohen sets the predicate, or I think they've wanted to remove the president since the day he stepped into office, and that Cohen hearing specifically sets the predicate for that. If you can't find anything on Russian collusion, and I don't believe there is anything at all, but if you can't find something on Russian collusion, just keep going until you do find something. When you think of things like, well, we got a report that Adam Schiff from the Intel Committee sent staff members up to New York to brief and prepare Cohen. I mean, I don't know if you want your tax dollars spent that way, but if the guy's got something to say, the guy's got something to say, and I get it. But of course, what we did find out is he knows nothing of Russian collusion. Remember, that's where this whole thing started, right. And that's been a 2-year narrative. Everybody should be judged equally under the law, but you got to remember this too. We prosecute crimes in this country, not prosecute individuals, and it sure seems to me like whether you like Donald Trump or don't like Donald Trump, this is still America, and we should be prosecuting crimes and just an ongoing investigation that never terminates and goes back long before the presidency, because that's what we're talking about. In New York State particularly, they're talking about opening up his license at the time his father was alive,
right?
And try and find anything to impeach him, and I think that's where they're going to try and head before the next presidential election is to set that up. And if you listen to Cohen's closing statement, among other things, I mean, quite honestly, it had all the talking points.
That was just a political thing. That was Lottie Davis speaking to him there. I mean, before that, okay, you can talk about what was your role with Donald Trump, and you can say, I've turned on him, I this and that, but that was all that was a political, a set of Democratic political talking points, and that's about all it was at that particular point.
That's how I felt about it too, and. Once again, there are important things in the world that are happening that impact every single one of us, whether it's, how North Korea acts, and are we going to be involved in some kind of convention or nuclear war with them, to our economy, to the things that the federal government has an involvement with in your every single day life, where the post office is and those kind of things. And those things are still important, I think, to people.
Yeah.
And
let me ask you this question. I know we're very polar in this country today. There are people who definitely hate Donald Trump. There are people who definitely like Donald Trump. In fact, we saw that. I just saw a poll the other day. 90% of Republicans are totally in favor of him now, whereas the Democrats obviously are against him. Now, I wonder if the Democrats, and I'm posing this just as a question, if the Democrats run the risk of doing what Republicans did back with Bill Clinton at the end of the 90s in trying to impeach him, and ultimately were unsuccessful, and they disappeared off the map. I mean, those guys, they had a whole brand new Republican Party, passionate, compassionate conservatives,
right.
And you didn't see hide nor hair of them in 2000 at the I remember I went to the Philadelphia one, and I also went to L.A. for the Democratic convention. You didn't see hide nor hair of any of those people. I wonder if they have any worry about overreaching, or if they feel that the country is so much behind them right now, somehow they're in no danger of that.
I think they do run a risk, and I think either party runs a risk. And I guess this is one of those things. If you're gonna make the accusation and ruin somebody's life, you better darn well be sure. And when it's the president of the United States, people, I think, give a special deference, even if they don't like that person.
Yeah.
That they know it's a tough job, and they want to believe that the president is doing, whether Democrat or Republican, what he or she believes is the best thing for the country.
Right.
And if it looks like it's just political, i.e., you're a Republican, we hate you. You're a Democrat, we hate you, and we want to throw you out of office. I think that most people look at that and say that's inappropriate. We don't want to see that. But I would also say, Gary, I'm not sure that they can help themselves. I mean, Tom Steyer, $100 million donor, is he had a rally for impeachment in Nadler's district, and he just had one in Elijah Cummings down in Maryland.
Yeah.
For the same thing. He's trying to push those members who have a lot to say about it. One, the judiciary, and the other, the oversight chairman. He's trying to push those members and others in particular into the impeachment discussion. That's where he wants them to be, and he wants them to be there because their supporters, their constituents, are pushing him there.
You know, it's interesting also that when you watch this going down right now, will Americans have a sense of fairness about this? And they say, okay, well, he wasn't colluding with the Russians. All right, then he wanted to build a hotel there, and he didn't really tell the truth about that. So was that big enough to impeach him? We kind of save impeachment for the worst thing that could be for a president. But there is no impeachment based on being outrageous or being petty or being narcissistic or being anything. I mean, we don't have any impeachment for that. So, in other words, just you don't impeach someone because you don't like them. You impeach someone because they did something to hurt your country, and there are very specific words in the Constitution to that effect.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, impeachment is it's a political remedy. It's not a legal remedy. So while we talk about high crimes and misdemeanors, we do want to believe as Americans that you don't impeach somebody because you don't like their manners or how they, like you said, if they're narcissistic or whatever. I mean, that's who the people elected, and whether it's one side or the other, the losing side kind of takes its lumps for the period and tries to work with that person. In this case, it just seems like they just really, and when I say this too, it's not only just liberal Democrats. There are some of those never Trump Republicans that just cannot accept the fact that this guy became president, and that's what it seems, and they just refuse to work with him, and even at their country's own peril. And I would just say that last bill that we did regarding the funding of Homeland Security at all, we made the situation worse. We actually made the situation worse just because we wanted to force Donald Trump into signing something that was embarrassing or maybe less than he wanted. But that's not good for your country. If it's not good for your country, that's
who you want to get out a little bit. Congressman, you mentioned the wall, and one of the things that people are talking about, obviously right now we have a bill that got passed in the House, of which you're a member, that basically said we're opposed to the wall, and we basically are not in favor of the president going out and finding alternative funding after we turned it down. So I'm not comfortable. I didn't like President Obama ruling by executive order, and I'm uneasy with the president going out and finding money after Congress turned him down. I understand politics were played, but what are your thoughts about that? I mean, going out and getting money after Congress said no, and they're the ones that generally fund these kind of things.
Yeah, constitutionally, absolutely. The Article I powers, as we know them, and all those powers limit the various branches, and particularly Congress is supposed to.
So checks and balances all over the place, yeah.
Absolutely. And people say, well, how could you ever be for this when you were so upset with other presidents that have done similar things? And similar is similar, but it's not exactly the same. And these subtleties are, we hold our hand up, our right hand up, and take an oath. And where even President Obama, for instance, said that the deferred action for childhood arrival, I don't know how many times did he say that it was not within his purview to do that. And then he went ahead and did it anyhow. That is upsetting because even he recognized it was not within his purview. This, whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, in my opinion, because of the law that Congress passed, I think it was in '76, the Emergency Declaration Act, does give the president to do this. And as a matter of fact, when that was passed in the 70s, as I understand it, it was to limit the president's already much more sweeping power that he had then. So while I I want Congress to get to this issue. That's one of the primary reasons I ever ran for Congress in the first place. Between immigration and the debt, this is what I was interested in working on. When Congress can't or refuses to, that's not an admission that there's no problem on our border. That's an admission that Congress can't get it together.
Yeah, and listen, I think we've had a national emergency with this for a long time. However, when the president came out and said this, and I kind of want to lead into something else with this, he came out and said, I wouldn't have to do this right now, but I'm going to do it and declare. And I'm going like, wait a second. Why don't you just say, I think it's a national emergency, period, instead of saying, I don't have to do this right now, but I'm going to do it. I mean, does he make it tough sometimes to pass legislation? There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, of course he does. I mean, the way he characterizes the things sometimes and the timing of them,
right,
I think are problematic for people, regardless of which side of the aisle on. Quite honestly, I thought, this should have been right up there with health care reform and the repeal of the ACA, Obamacare. Right. It has, as you do, I agree that it is a national emergency. It's been one for a very long time. It
Absolutely.
should have been one of the first things on the docket. And, I do question the timing of it. And I think that if he was going to do this, he could have done it a long time ago.
Yep.
And informed Congress of where he wants to go then. He could have done it when Republicans were in charge of the House. And if we couldn't get it together, which we didn't and couldn't, he should have declared it then.
Right, exactly right. Because that was where he started. I mean, that's where he made his bones, really, and started to run for the presidency was on his talk about a wall and immigration and so forth, and Mexico was going to build it and pay for it and all that. You also, one of the things you're dealing with right now that's not as sexy as some of these other things we've talked about, and yet very much important, the price of drugs in the country.
Right.
And what's going on there with that right now in Congress?
Well, I think there are a bunch of different proposals, and again, what it kind of runs is the gamut between complete socialist proposals to market-based proposals. I think one of the issues, among other things, is that companies over the past have paid for the research and development for a particular drug, and then that after the patent runs out or what have you, the drug is then sold, and then the new owner of the drug, so to speak, then raises the prices astronomically. And the old adage, well, you got to pay for research and development, doesn't fly in that case because it's already been paid for, and that rightfully upsets a lot of folks. Now, the issue, among other things, is that the United States is really the only country that actually innovates and does the research on this stuff, and the rest of the world gets the benefit. The problem is when the American people are the only ones paying the bill, and we've got to find some solution, in my opinion, that is, A, market-based, but also be realistic that it can happen, and realistic that it actually deals with the actual cost and the oftentimes way too expensive cost of drugs and prescription medicines that people need for the quality of life, and some need just for their lives itself. And you talk about this EpiPen issue and some of these other things. It was clear that the companies were and are gouging their customers. And that's where, the unbridled capitalist markets and competitive markets don't really work. But quite honestly, one of the reasons they don't work is because they're not really competitive markets. The government has come in and distorted the market, and some of these companies have a monopoly, which means they can charge anything they want to. And that's because the government has said that's the only drug available, and the only producer or purveyor that's available to do it is Company X. And
so your price is the prevailing price, and no competition need apply, at least for the moment. Congressman, always good having you on this show. I know we got 8 million. We got to probably go 5 or 6 hours today on this, but
sure.
You got to get to work, and we're there already. So we appreciate you taking the time this morning, though, to hit some really important items. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gary.